I'm still here. So you want to go ahead and start this thing?
Yeah, let's start this thing, finally.
All right. Welcome to the Strange and Dirty Cryptid Podcast. I'm Dwight Campbell.
And I'm Robyn MoonShadow.
And this week's episode is going to be on the Honey Island Swamp Monster. Robyn, do you have an intro for this you can read, or you want me to just kick it off and start talking about it?
Well, since this is our first live broadcast, let's just kick it off.
All right, the Honey Island Swamp Monster. The Honey Island area, is in the eastern part of Louisiana. And the swamp itself is actually one of the least altered swamps and one of the most pristine swamps in the United States. It's 20 miles long, 7 miles wide. There's approximately 36,000 acres that are sanctioned that nobody can mess with to keep it pristine. There's over 70,000 acres overall in Honey Island. Honey Island's home to alligators, raccoons, owls, boars, snakes, turtles, bald eagles, black bear, etc., etc. It's located on the Pearl River Wildlife Management Area, and of course, it's also home to the Honey Island Swamp Monster. This first came to light by a guy named Harlan Ford in 1963. Harlan Ford is a retired air traffic controller, and he first found tracks of this in 63. When he passed away, they ended up finding a Super 8 film that possibly showed the creature. This was after his death, and it was found in his belongings. Harlan searched for this creature ever since he first found evidence of it. He casted many tracks. Possibly that Super 8 film was of the creature itself. So this is one of the biggest legends, maybe the biggest legend of all the swamp monsters / skunk ape types. And Robyn, you got anything you want to add on that with Honey Island Swamp Monster?
Well, besides Harlan, Ted Williams, who lived practically in the swamp, saw more than one on and off all of his life. Even when he was a kid, he tells a story that he was swimming in a particular part of the swamp one afternoon, him and his cousin, and he saw two of them waist deep, and they were picking apples or something out of a tree. And it scared him pretty bad. He swam as fast as he could to get to shore and ran back to the house, both him and his cousins.
Mistaken, Ted Williams had a gun on him at the time, and he stood on the bank and tried to get them to look at him, and they never would look at him. And he could have fired a shot and hit them, but they looked so human-like, even though they were covered in hair, that he just couldn't pull the trigger, and he never could get them to look at him. They just ignored him. And of course, that's fairly common when you start talking about, Bigfoot sightings that are from a little bit of a distance, but you can still get details. Sometimes they're either aggressive or they just totally ignore the witness altogether. It's like either or. And in this case, the two critters totally ignored him, and he could have fired a shot off, but he didn't.
Yeah, he claims that he'd also seen juveniles as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think Ted Williams also had another sighting. I think the first time he saw one, I think he was out on his farm and headed to his trap lines, and he saw what looked like a stump in the distance, and it didn't move, and he stopped and stared at it, and it took off running, and he described the hair as dark gray. And he said it jumped over a fence or an embankment and it disappeared pretty quickly. And he said it scared him pretty bad. He didn't have any idea that anything like that was out there.
Yeah, he said that he saw ones that were up to 8 feet tall.
Exactly.
400 to 500 pounds, yeah, and that they were the gray color and eyes as large as silver dollars.
Yeah, and he didn't report the whole thing right away for fear that people would make fun of him. And then when he came forward, he acknowledged that most people wouldn't believe him, but he wanted to come forward and tell what he had seen.
You're talking about Harlan, and I was talking about Ted Williams.
Ted Williams.
Oh, yeah, that's what he said. And he would prefer that they were left alone in the swamp as well.
Exactly. Yes, and Harlan also more than one time, Harlan had seen their tracks and seen where they went to the water's edge and would kneel down to get a drink of water, but he rarely ever saw their tracks going right into the water. It was always around it, but he wouldn't see their tracks go in, but he would just see where they would kneel down and even see their front print in the mud where they would kneel down and get a drink. And one of Harlan's buddies claimed to have taken a shot at one. He was out there looking around one night, and he got some yellowish eye shine, and he fired a shot at it, and they went back the next day and never could find any sign or any blood or anything, so they think that he missed it. And I think his name was Jim Hartzog that had taken a shot at it.
Yep, I believe you're right. His descriptions of the footprints are much different than Harlan's casts. Harlan's casts are three-toed and webbed and missing their big toe. They're crocodile prints. They're not Bigfoot prints. The size and the depth impressions do not equal the height and the weight, unless it's a giant chicken.
Yeah, I think that one wildlife expert had casted it and tried to do a recreation of what possibly the feet and the stride would look like in its tracks, and he estimated that it could have in fact been 7 feet and 400 pounds by how deep it sank in there into the sand. The weird thing is with those three-toed prints, I don't know that I agree with you that it looked like an alligator print. I do agree it almost looked like a bird type print. But nevertheless, I mean, it's a 12-inch print, which is larger than what a lot of people have. And the Honey Island tracks are just some really weird-looking tracks. Now, interestingly enough, I did an investigation down in South Carolina, which, isn't quite as deep as where the swamps are, but it's real sandy, and there's some smaller swamps and creeks. And there was a guy that had some 11 and 12-inch tracks that weren't exactly the same, but were very similar with three-toed. They didn't quite look as bird-like as some of the Honey Island swamp prints did, but they'd still look very similar to it. So that was very interesting as well. So Robyn may have gotten booted off of here. We're talking about the Honey Island swamp monster and the legends surrounding it. Again, first brought forward by Harlan Ford, but a farmer in that area, Ted Williams, also had sightings as well, and the community was really aware of this, much like the Fouke monster, where a lot of people in the community had their own experiences. They also had experiences with the Honey Island swamp monster as well. So we're talking about this. Robyn, if you can see me, let me try and send you another invite and see if I can get you back on here. Maybe I can get you back on here live and talking with me. So I think Rob might be. Are you back on here?
I'm back.
Okay. Well, stop hitting them wrong buttons now. I mean, this got to do this right.
I didn't touch nothing.
You just got kicked out. So I kind of recapped a little bit of what we talked about. The Honey Island Swamp is just, it's a real special place. Do you have any thoughts on that area from your end, Robyn, about it being a remote in a pristine swampland?
No, but there is enough there to sustain a Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
Most naturalists in the area would agree that the tracks don't match as to what I was saying. I mean, if you put the profile of these tracks that he was supposed to have casted with other alligator pictures, you'll see the similarities.
Mm-hmm. Yes, most often described as 7 foot tall, 400 pounds with 12-inch three-toed tracks. And it has been described with reddish, amberish eyes glow, but also with yellow eye shine as well. So that's the most common description of the Honey Island swamp monster. I've done one investigation somewhat near swamps, and I've looked in swamp areas. One thing about it is people aren't going to go too deep in swamps. It's not, it's a lot easier, and then people really aren't going to go miles and miles deep in the wilderness. That's something I do. I'll hike out several miles off trail in the wilderness, but when you want to talk about the swamps, it's even harder to get miles and miles into a swamp. You're pretty much going to have to use a canoe, but at places, the water may not even be deep enough for a canoe. So when you talk about an area that can hide a creature, a swampland is as good an area as any to hide, a big cryptid creature.
There is a.
I think Robyn got kicked off again. Let me send her another invite. Every time she talks a little bit, she gets kicked back out again. So we'll keep trying to add her back on here and see. Covered where she is. You back on here?
I'm back.
We're going to have to get you some kind of
this. There are a couple of locals who run tours through the swamp.
Exactly.
And they haven't seen it or found evidence of it, but it is one of their main themes. Is the Honey Island swamp monster.
That's exactly. A lot of people, when you have a sighting in an area, people really want to capitalize on it and commercialize it. And for a lot of folks interested, when they come across the commercialization, people have had sightings, even, with the knobby Bigfoot up in my area, the town of Kaiser really jumped on it and commercialized it. So a lot of people, they tend, to be skeptical from that standpoint because people are out trying to make a buck off of it. But they don't realize, this generated from a guy named Harlan Ford, who was an air traffic controller. I mean, a very respectable
air traffic controller, yes.
Yeah, a very respectable job, and a job with a whole lot of responsibility. That's not somebody that's apt just to make up a story. And then he spent several years trying to get documentation and following this creature And of course, you're not going to get a lot of help with this. When I do my investigations, there's not a lot of people that are just wanting to go out there and go out with me step and step and do what I do. I've got, a couple of guys that do, but it's rare. Me and Bob Trent talk to each other, and we're always like, there ain't too many people out there that's going to do what we do. So many people are interested. So, Harlan's just another guy that really had to do this on his own and investigate it, pretty much by himself. And, I think that, his whole, reporting of this, I think is on the level and pretty honest. So how do you feel about Harlan Ford, Robyn, when you look at him?
Well, the story goes that he was flying over an abandoned campsite, and he flew down to get a better look at it, and that's when he saw the Bigfoot. First off, it was on all fours, and then it stood up and then galloped. And for his first 3 trips out there, he saw it, and he got these tracks that I don't believe. Do I think he initially saw something? I do think he initially saw something. Why else would you continue to go back to that area? But I think things after that, including this movie that was released after his death, I think the rest of that was a hoax.
Okay, so you think elements of the Honey Island Swamp Monster, you think some of the tracks have been hoaxed and certain elements of it aren't real?
Well, definitely the tracks. Like I said, they're smaller size. Even the toes are too small to support something that heavy or that tall. Like I said, unless it's a giant chicken. So I do believe a lot of the elements of his stories and his claims are hoax. But we do see that sometimes in this field, where they'll get really good evidence, and then you won't get anything for a long time, and then you get desperate to find something, and then you hoax something. I mean, there's nothing worse you could do to yourself. It ruins your reputation when you start hoaxing.
Oh, yeah.
You lose all credibility.
There's no doubt about that. Now, what about, these tracks do bear a similarity to some of the lizard man tracks, which are some weird looking, almost bird-like tracks as well. How do you think the print cast, I don't know if you really studied it, but how do you compare the print cast of the Honey Island Swamp Monster to those of the lizard man found out in Bishopville, South Carolina?
They look nothing alike.
Okay.
Nothing alike. The 4 tracks that Harlan did cast, front and back feet, I mean, they don't look like hands. Again, they look like alligators.
Okay.
Even the 3-toed that we found doesn't look anything like the ones that were claimed to have found in Bishopville.
They do look different than the ones in Bishopville. I think the similarity.
I have seen other tracks. People have showed me that look like the 3-toed print we found in pink beds. I've seen several of those. So there's something to that. I'm going to find out what it is.
I know that some of the tracks that were found in Honey Island did look a lot like the ones that we investigated on the private property. Excuse me, but some of the other ones did look really bird-like and did look pretty different. Now, the question I got for you, if you're going to hoax something, why would you hoax such a weird-looking print? Wouldn't you be more apt to hoax something that looked like the Patterson-Gimlin prints or the prints that were in publication at that time?
Because it is unusual. And back in the 60s and 70s, Bigfoot research isn't like it is today. I mean, Ted Williams described the tracks that he had found as being 5-toed and not 3.
Exactly.
And human-like, where these other claims are not. Even the video, like I said, that was found after Harlan died, that's a guy in a monkey suit, in a gorilla suit, running through the trees.
Yeah, there is a lot
of the proper walk, the proper gait. Its shoulders are wrong. It walks like a person and nothing like a Bigfoot.
Yeah, and again, that film was found after his death, so he never really brought that forward as such. It was found in his belongings after he had passed away, and so that makes it somewhat suspicious from that standpoint. How do you really even know it was his if that was the case? Sometimes that makes me a little bit skeptical if somebody tried, but I'm not going to suggest that, though. I just think I'm a little skeptical that wasn't really actually a piece of Harlan Ford's evidence, because he never brought it forth while he was alive. It was allegedly found after his death in his belongings. So I've always been a little skeptical of that. And of course, it's so far away that it's hard to get any details of it. With the Patterson-Gimlin film, you can get more details. Even the Freeman footage, which is a little bit grainy, you can still get more details than you can off of that film, because partly the foliage is covering up the movements anyway. But I would tend to agree with your analysis of that, no doubt. Are you still there, Robyn, or are you done? Are you off again? Let's see if I can bring Robyn back on board again. She keeps wanting to jump on. Maybe she don't like analysis. Robyn, are you there?
I'm here. We'll just keep right on going. Everybody knows my internet is a nightmare.
Yeah, and I want to acknowledge I have had some internet issues with my computer. My phone is good. But once I get that back straight again, I'll get back to posting the podcast at 7 o'clock on Tuesdays once we get that straightened out. But this live thing isn't that bad. If we can just get it kind of smooth over a little bit, it's not too bad going live, is it?
You're not the one getting booted every 5 minutes, though. We're just rolling with it.
Maybe the public just wants to hear me talk. I am Hollywood after all. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yes, Mr. Hollywood.
So point blank and bottom line.
Excuse me, Captain Hollywood.
Yeah. Hey, Kitty, how you doing? And Robyn is back on. So bottom line, do you talk in the Honey Island swamp monster? What elements are you accepting as facts on this? And what elements do you just don't believe? Overall, what's your take on?
Kitty said hi back.
Hey, Kitty. And we're bringing them back on board. So are you ready to give your analysis? What your bottom line is on it?
I believe Ted Williams' story. All his accounts is what we know about Bigfoot, and this coming from when he was very young, like teenager up until today. So 1920s, 1940s, when there wasn't a lot about Bigfoot, he's telling us about Bigfoot, of what we know today. And I believe him, and there are elements of Harlan Williams' story which I just don't believe at all.
Okay. I think that's fair enough. Me personally, it's funny. We didn't really discuss it that much between the two of us about the Honey Island swamp monster. But it's funny how you're aware of Ted Williams, and I am too, because, you know, I really think that Ted Williams has been the most honest and most trustworthy eyewitness to a creature in the Honey Island Swamp area that you could have. So I think we were both drawn to that about Ted Williams. I don't think there's any doubt that he's telling the truth, and that he had a couple of fantastic experiences, and this was a real level-headed and a really good guy. Harlan Ford, I admit I've always been a big fan of Harlan Ford. Anything on him looking for the monster on, you know, the local news reports. He was on In Search Of, which I loved that show as a kid. You know, I've always been a huge Harlan Ford fan. So it's, you know, being a big fan of someone, you don't really want to come forward and, you know, say you don't think elements of their story are true. I think I've always felt the Honey Island Swamp tracks that he got, some of them look way more like a big bird, and you're saying an alligator, than they did, you know, a skunk ape. They went right past the webbed toes or the 3-point toes that we get in some of these instances, even with the quote unquote, the skunk apes. And it really went into a really weird looking track. So I honestly, I don't know what to make of that, but I think that Harlan Ford did document many movements and many areas of this creature. And, you know, overall, I believe, you know, the Harlan Ford story. I definitely believe in the Honey Island Swamp Monster, and I would love to go down there and do my own investigation at some point in time. You know, swamps are so difficult to get really back deep in. They're dangerous. I mean, if you get bit by a snake way out in the swamp, or you run into an alligator, you're on that snake's territory and in the alligator's territory. You're just not going to be able to run out of there. It's a dangerous place. Swamps are very dangerous, and if you're going to go deep in a swamp, you really got to have experience and know what you're doing, and you really need a concise plan of action to go deep in there. And again, you know, it's hard to find 5 or 6 people that can be a team and go in somewhere and investigate. We're usually doing this by ourselves or with a buddy here and there. If I ever go one day, I'm going to have to, you know, be on the top of my game, because them swamps, if you go deep, deep, deep in a swamp, you can put yourself in a life and death situation. Are you still on?
I'm still on. I was just waiting for you.
Well, you go ahead and take the mic. I'll pipe down and let you have
it. It's a funny thing is these podcasts we do for everybody, these are our conversations that we have when we travel together and do our work together. So yeah, we have some pretty cool conversations.
Oh yeah, it's cool. Now Kitty Billington is asking Robyn, please share details about the fur you found.
Yeah, she's talking about the Bigfoot hair we found.
Okay.
I do believe I've sent her pictures of it. Yeah, that was found, well, it was the last 2 years in a row. 2 years ago, we found a single hair, which I analyzed. And it's nothing, it's not bear hair. It's nothing like anything that I've seen before. And that one piece is gold. We found that with Tim Dills. And last year, we found a considerable amount of hair also. It's the same, but I do believe it's a different individual.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with getting that DNA tested is nobody will touch it. As soon as you say Bigfoot, they don't want to talk to you no more.
Yeah, and Tim also gave you some samples.
He did.
Of that poop that was really interesting. I've never seen poop that big and that size. It looked like a giant person had just pooped. I mean, it didn't look, the texture of it looked a little bear-like, but in no way, shape, or form did it resemble the bear poop that you'll find out in the woods, and how it was shaped and everything.
It's about this big around, and I have samples of it. I couldn't bring the whole thing back, of course, but it's about this big around. And I don't know, it's what, 6-7 inches long, including the piece that broke off at the end. Okay, it has acorns in it. It has food grain, like cereals that you would feed to cows. It has a meat product, which I haven't been able to identify.
That's crazy right there. And I saw where you took some pictures under the microscope of the hairs and had explained, the characteristics of that particular hair and why it was interesting. I found that fascinating.
I'll explain.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I'll explain. The outside of the hair is called the cuticle. Okay, we all have that. It's different. This one is different. They look like what I would best describe as fish scales. They're on top of one another like this. Okay, when a human gets broken hair, it lifts, which means it causes, damage to your hair. But this hair, all these samples, the cuticle is so tightly pressed, it's practically waterproof. So water runs right off of it. And in order for me to analyze the hair, I had to use something that we called gum, not actual gum that you chew, but it's gum. So in the very center of the hair, it is solid black, just a continuous long black line. Okay. Now, if it was a bear, it would have breaks in the color. Or if it was a skunk, it would look a certain way. Or if it was a raccoon or any other animal, it looks a certain way. And with all these characteristics, it helps us to identify what the animal is. And there is no local animal that has this hair. I even looked at leopards, just in case. 3 species of bears. It's none of these things. Now, as we talk about webbed toes in Bigfoot, that's what I call a genetic hiccup. It's something both parents would have to have in order to pass that along to the baby, like a single or double rows of teeth, an extra finger. So it's probably inbred. And through big cat research, if they're inbred too many times, they become aggressive. So it could be the same thing with Bigfoot, where they're aggressive. Well, we also know that if an animal is hurt, a wild animal is hurt, they can become quite aggressive as well.
Okay. Getting back to the Honey Island Swamp Monster, one other tidbit that I didn't bring up, and I was interested in what you know about it, is there is one local legend that a train had crashed in the early part of the 20th century, and there was a traveling circus that was aboard that train, and a group of chimps escaped and got out into the swampland, and they possibly bred with some of the local animals. I don't know if that includes redneck hillbillies, but what do you know about that? What is the validity of that local legend?
Well, we've certainly heard a lot about these circus things and animals getting out, haven't we?
Yeah, that's
chimpanzees breeding with local wildlife. No, only chimpanzees can breed with other chimpanzees. It's impossible to make a hybrid species of, say, a chimp and an alligator. A chimp is not going to get the hots for an alligator, especially when the alligator might want to eat them. They're not praying mantises.
Okay. And it's impossible for a a chip and a redneck to mate too, right?
I'm sure they tried.
I pity it.
That's right.
I pity that chimp if he ran into the boys of deliverance back in there. He might be in for a world of hurt. But that's one other tidbit that sounds, like you said, in every instance, that's always there, that there was an escaped circus animal. Which, I mean, it doesn't mean that it's not valid, but you hear that.
That's true. It doesn't mean that it's not valid that some animal could have escaped, because we know it does happen.
Yes, I do think one thing's interesting about that is that there's, I think, an island or an area in South Carolina that there's a lot of small monkeys in. And at one point in time, they were put there as part of an experiment, and they've thrived in that area. And I don't think that's swampland, but I do think it's along a river. So I do think that's interesting that primates may have that ability to adapt to their surroundings and survive if there's enough of them, even out of their natural quote unquote habitat. But I'm a little skeptical.
If there is enough to sustain a species, they will stay as long as there is enough food and room.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Like with Bigfoot, we know they're semi-nomadic. They move on before that specific area they're in, before they take all the food out of the area. So they roam around.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and as for cold weather, well, we don't have any indigenous monkeys or apes here. But then you have like the snow monkeys in China. They stay in the snow. They stay in the snow, and they go down and they bathe in the hot springs, and people come and feed them grain, and they even dive down to get the food.
Exactly.
And your area, even in the winter, is pretty warm.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, do you have any last thoughts on it? Is there anywhere else we can go with it? I think we've just about covered everything on it. So any final words on the Honey Island Swamp Monster?
No, just what we'd love to hear everybody's opinions about it, what your thought is. I'll post some pictures of the tracks up, and I'll see if I can get my hands on the what I consider the hoax footage to share.
Do me a favor with that. Also get the Lizard Man cast and compare the Lizard Man, the Honey Island Swamp Monster, and I'll try on my end to get some more evidence of that and post that up tonight.
Kitty says, do I have any wildlife?
Any wildfires?
No. No, we're lucky this year. We haven't, not that I'm aware of. Dwight, you got any up there?
We haven't had anything too bad up in this area lately. Of course, a few years ago, one of the areas that I squatched got burned pretty bad. Of course, everybody knows Gatlinburg. It burned really bad around there a few years ago, but that whole area came back pretty quick. I think that, first of all, I think Bigfoot's Kitty, a lot of them, they know where all the caves are, and they also know where there's underground layers that maybe aren't connected to a cave system. But I think they have underground hiding spots that they can get to. And I think that helps to protect them. Living out in the wilderness for so long, I think they're pretty good, about knowing when fires are around and maneuvering around fires. But like with any animal, they could get caught in a fire. I'm going to tell you, I'm a forest firefighter. Okay. In the past, I've done that job, and this ain't the movies. You can't outrun a fire. I mean, we did plenty of fires that we put out and we did prescribed burns too as part of our training. And I sat back and watched the prescribed burns, and I mean, that fire will move so fast that no critter can outrun it. So if you get caught and one's right up on you, no matter what kind of critter you are, I think a deer can probably run through the woods faster than anything, through the foliage, through the dense forest. And, deers, if a fire's right up on them, they're not going to be able to outrun it. So I think there's an awareness on part of Bigfoot, on the forest people, and I think they're able to maneuver around them. But there's no doubt that there's been casualties of Bigfoot and every kind of animal out there as well when you have forest fires.
Yeah, I agree with that. They know when to skedaddle out of the area. But we've had that question before about what we think what Bigfoots do in fires and earthquakes and such. And like one of the big San Francisco earthquakes, the dogs and the cats disappeared a week before that big earthquake hit. They were just gone, and nobody could find them. And then they came back after the earthquake. So they were feeling rumblings, and they got their senses of working, and they just took off right out of the areas.
Well, I think, Kitty, there's stories where people have found remains and have covered it up, especially the stories around the Mount St. Helens eruption and some fires in that area, and said that there were remains found but were covered up. I think remains that are in the forest, they can disappear pretty quickly. And also, do Bigfoot, do they bury their dead? Do they go to a place when they know they're going to die and die there? If they're caught, in a fire, their remains may not stay around that long. They may not, if one's caught dead, caught burned up out there, you may have a limited amount of time to find any type of remains. But that is a fact that nobody has ever brought forth any remains at all of a
That's another question we get asked a lot too, is what do we think become of the Bigfoot bones? Well, there's predation. If they just died in one spot, the animals get to them and the bones get spread around. Of all my time in the woods, I've never seen a bear. I've never seen a bear's skull, bare bones, never. And for me, my opinion on I think that they bury their dead.
You have seen a bear
our cousins 30,000 years ago were burying their dead.
Yes,
Like there's 30,000 years ago, they didn't have a religion and they were still covering up their dead. So this is why I think Bigfoot do the same thing, is I think they bury their dead. Maybe not in a customary ritual of with religion attached to it, but I do believe they bury their dead. Your thoughts, Dwight?
I think that's a possibility. I think that anything's possible with these creatures. It's also possible that when they die, when they are getting ready to die of old age or of disease, that they may have a designated area that they go to die as well. So that's a possibility.
From the Ice Age, go back further. I think Bigfoot, given its description and what it looks like, is part of the Pithecus family. So you have to go way back before the Ice Age. The Pithecine family is like human and like ape. And that's what a Bigfoot to me seems to be. And a lot of people share that view, that they are a type of great ape.
I do think that there can still be remains in the ice caps, like Kitty is suggesting. So maybe one day we'll get some insights into these creatures. Maybe there'll be one perfectly preserved in the ice that somebody will find one day.
Yeah, I think they're very old. I think they are a very old ape. And there might be bones in the museum. We don't know, and they just haven't gotten to them yet because it's years before they are actually properly examined.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stories that certain
they've learned to be afraid of us. Some are more bold than others. The ones here I find are quite shy, and when I go down to North Carolina and Dwight and I do our research together, we've had pretty damn good luck.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some of that is me, but
well, I think the thing about it in Canada and down here is, you know, if they do show some aggression, they've always got a corridor that they can just go up the mountain and disappear. I mean, you're not going to be able to run after these creatures. Once they go up the mountain through the pass, they're gone. You know, they know where all the escapes routes are. So sometimes if they do engage people, they're still very tactical about it, and they can still get out of that area very quickly and disappear.
And they are curious. Most of the time, you won't even know that they're around. It always amazes me with something this big, tall, and heavy, you don't even hear them. It's always amazing. But the ones in like around Dwight's area, I find are very more curious, where ours here are more shy.
I think that's interesting. Maybe one day I'll make it up to Canada and research that area a little bit. You know, I found in these areas in North Carolina, I just think they're extremely tactical. They're very intelligent, and they're very tactical in every little thing that they do. I really, really firmly believe that.
That's right. They won't do anything unless it's in their favor.
Exactly. It's almost like, you know, they've got their rules, and they don't ever break the rule. And I think it's possible. I'm not a real big believer that, you know, Bigfoots would snatch a person, but I think if a Bigfoot broke that rule and kidnapped a person, I don't think that the others in the clan, the others in that area, would be accepting of that. I think that there would be a lot of consequences if they engaged and kidnapped, you know, a person. I really do. I think they've got their rules that they live by. And the question is, are they more instinctive? Are they instinctively like that? Or are they intelligent to the point where, you know, they have a tribal society and they teach their young and they have the rules? I think it's kind of a mixture of both of those things, in my opinion. I really do. But I think
we're taught from birth to stay away from us.
Exactly. Yeah.
It wasn't always like that, though. When First Nations were here, it was no different for us and my ancestors to see them out wandering in the fields, foraging. It was no different than seeing a bear.
Mm-hmm.
We're working on it, Katie. Wait till COVID is over and we'll get it going.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to go up to Colorado. I know there's a guy up there named Mark Para that does a lot of good research. I wouldn't mind meeting him and talking to him a little bit up there. So one day I definitely want to go up to Colorado. Most people want to go to Colorado to smoke some pot. I want to go to Colorado to find Bigfoot. So I'm going to come up there one day. There ain't no doubt about that.
And Kitty's gotten herself all better now, so she's going to go out with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, she agrees with you.
Yeah, Colorado is one of the biggest hot spots out there.
I keep leaning ahead because the writing on my screen is small.
So do we have any more questions from anybody? If not, I think that about covers it for this live podcast, Robyn, unless you want to keep going on for a little while.
No, I just like to thank everybody for joining us. We had a bit of a rough start, seeing this was our first live podcast. Backwards talking, I am, Yoga.
Well, I think next
So thank
time
you
we
for
do
joining us.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Strange and Dirty Cryptid Podcast. I'm Dwight Campbell.
And I'm Robyn MoonShadow.
Reminding you, if you can't be strange and dirty, please be careful.